open your newspaper or log on to your go-to news website, chances are you will see something about Manipur, and it's all bad news. Violence, death, arson, ethnic violence. Manipur is one of the 8 states in northeast India. Beautiful place. But since May this year, the scenes have been ugly. 2 communities are locked in a conflict. One is the Meitei community, the second is the Kuki. Now remember these 2 names, because their history and their culture is key to understanding this conflict. Time for a flashback. A simple question first. How old is Manipur? The first record is from 33 AD from a source called Chetarol Kumbaba. It's not 100% reliable though, because this is a court chronicle. You could call it a mix between myth and history. Either way, this chronicle talks about a Meitei kingdom in Manipur. Its ancestry goes back to this king, Pakamba. He is often called the dragon or serpent king. His symbol is quite famous even today, a snake with its tail in its mouth. Every Meitei ruler descended from Pakamba, or at least that's the belief. Their religion was polytheistic, meaning they worshipped more than one god, but it wasn't Hinduism. Most Meiteis today are Hindus though, but back then they followed Sanamahism. The Meiteis were not alone during this time. Another community shared the land, the Nagas. Now this community lived up in the hills of Manipur. They were tribals, and every now and then they would raid the Meitei kingdom. This is where history becomes a bit fuzzy. The Meiteis claimed their kingdom was all-encompassing. The valley, the hills, all of it. But the Nagas disagree. Many of them say the hill tribes were always independent. You can imagine how complex this equation was. Hills, valleys, rulers and tribals. But this equation was about to get a lot more complicated. Around the late 18th century, the British arrived. As usual, they got down to business. In 1762, Raja Jai Singh of Manipur signed a deal with them. He needed British help to defend against Burma, or as we call it today, Myanmar. The British had a brainwave. What if they could bring new people into Manipur, settle them along the foothills? This would have 2 objectives. 1, it would defend against the Burmese invasion, and 2, it would protect against the Naga raids. So Manipur's king did just that. He resettled tribals from the Kuki Chin hills of Burma in Manipur. And that completes the state's demography: the Meiteis, the Nagas, and the Kukis. But the Burmese continued to invade Manipur, and the Kukis kept on coming. In fact, Burma occupied Manipur from 1819 to 1826. It's called the 7 Years of Devastation. The occupation ended after the First Anglo-Burmese War. The British won decisively. This meant both good news and bad. The good news was the end of the Burmese occupation. The bad news was the British replaced Burma. Manipur became a British protectorate. Yes, there was a king on the throne, but everyone knew who was in charge. And years passed like this. But in 1890, there was a palace coup in Manipur. So once again, the British got their hands dirty. The Anglo-Manipur War broke out in 1891. The British won. They installed Churachand, the 5-year-old, as king. Now this was a very important moment in Manipur's history. The British drew an imaginary line in the state. The Meitei Valley would be under the colonial government, and the hills beyond, well, they couldn't care less. By this time, the Kukis had begun raids of their own. To prevent this, the British did what they do best. They cracked down. And this animosity reached a tipping point in 1917. World War I had broken out. The 5-year-old boy king was now a Maharaja. The British asked him for soldiers. The Nagas agreed, but the Kukis did not. They launched a rebellion against the British. They continued to fight for almost 2 years. In the end, the British Indian Army had to be called in. The Kukis were driven further into the forest. And those events still influence Manipur's demography. The Kukis make up around 28% of the state's population. But they live in the hills, which make up 90% of the state's area. The Meiteis form 53% of the population, but they live in the valley, which is just 10% of the area. And despite this, relations were largely smooth. Like I said, the Kukis were brought in as protectors for the Meitei. They hated the British, but not the Meitei royals. Take the last king, Bodha Chandra Singh. He travelled around with 4 Kuki bodyguards. Independence should have made things better, but successive governments failed to do very much. In 1947, Manipur acceded to India. 2 years later, it became a union territory. Around this time, the Naga insurgency began. Naga tribes in India were demanding a separate country. The Meiteis also took up arms. They were already dreaming of the good old royal days, of reclaiming the lost glory of the Manipur kingdom. So now the Meiteis were fighting on two fronts, against the Indian government and against the Naga insurgents. Soon the Kukis set up their own insurgent groups. They wanted Kuki land. Now this isn't supposed to be a separate country. It's a new state within India. That's what they want. So you have three communities and three insurgencies. And their loyalties? Well, all of them hate each other. Even the tribal Nagas and Kukis. In 1993, there was major violence. Hundreds of people were killed and thousands uprooted. It was insurgency versus insurgency. Unfortunately, those wounds have not healed. Today, the Meiteis have two major grievances. One, they feel their culture and language is under threat. And two, they feel their state demography is changing. How? Because of illegal Kuki migration from Myanmar. The Meiteis say they feel besieged. So what's their solution? They want to be declared as scheduled tribe. The Kuki are already scheduled tribes, ST. The Meitei want the same designation. Now this would give them quotas in colleges and government jobs. The Kukis say, don't even think about it. As we saw, the Meiteis were rulers. They enjoyed political power. So the Kukis ask, why do they need reservation now? And all of this brings us to the present day situation, a state in crisis. You can't blame one factor for this situation. It's a combination of many. Medieval geopolitics, colonialism, geography, all of it has contributed. But so did our leadership. Successive governments have failed to mainstream the Northeast. Thus, insurgencies festered. They also failed in long-term ethnic reconciliation. Hence the repeated flare-ups. So what can be done now? The first order of business is to control the violence. Then to build trust. The central government has already convened an all-party meeting. It is important because this issue needs broad consensus. The ethnic rifts may appear too wide, but it's moments like these that test our democracy and our union.